So ladies and gentlemen, this is Steve with my audio stuff, and I have another treat for you today. This is my Radio Shack STA 84 stereo receiver from about, I think 1977, 78. This is the bigger cousin of the STA 64, which I did a video back just a few days ago. The 64 was rated about 16 watts per channel and really a very excellent receiver, very potent, very quick. And this is rated at about 25 watts per channel, and it has a few oddities that were pretty unique to Radio Shack, which is one of the reasons why I like it. The first, of course, you find it in the speaker control here. You know, it has A, B, A and B. Then it has QVOX, which is the simulated 4-channel stereo, not truly 4-channel, but you get the point. And then, of course, bass, treble, very low key, volume control, tuning, and this also features auto magic tuning. I love that stuff, and what that means is that if you press the auto magic button here and you get near enough, an FM stereo station, it will tune the station in for you and then lock it into stereo. And I don't really have an antenna hooked up to this thing right now. I just put this on my counter because I wanted to show everybody about this, but it's a pretty potent unit. You can look at the selector on it, auxiliary, phono. That's for a magnetic cartridge phono, and then FM muting, and AM. Then tape monitor, mono, high filter, loudness. One of the travesties or tragedies of Radio Shack, starting really around 1976 all the way up into the early 80s, is that they marketed a fair number of these receivers with what was known as perfect loudness. And I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but perfect loudness was Radio Shack's attempt to boost the lows into oblivion when you engaged the loudness control. So it was not listenable at all. And this must have been the decision, I've said this before, of some cigar smoking executive, and then the engineers just kind of cringed and said, okay, sir, if that's what you want, we'll put that in the units. But Radio Shack quietly did away with this in the early 80s on virtually all of their receivers because it was just horrific. This particular receiver features perfect loudness, and so if you depress or press the loudness button, it's just unusable. The bass is boosted so far beyond where it should be that it's not even usable. And about the only thing you can do with these, if you have a mind to, is go into the receiver, and I'll show you what it looks like here in a moment internally, and replace the 2 resistors, because it's stereo loudness control, with higher values to help cut the boost down to where it boosts the way loudness should boost. But I haven't done anything to this one, maybe just for nostalgia, but this does have perfect loudness. If you want more bass out of it, you could certainly hook up an EQ through the tape loop and all of that, and that would work just fine. FM front end, about 2 microvolts is the sensitivity. You might be able to tweak it a little better than that, maybe 1.9 microvolts on a good day. Not a bad FM front end. Selectivity is decent on this thing. It's probably within 2 dB, maybe a little less than that. So if you get into crowded markets, this thing tunes pretty good. You can see the volume controls, volume/balance controls, independence, and they work just fine on this thing. Little demonstration of the auto magic tuning. If I touch the tuning knob, see, then it puts it into normal tuning, and if I let it go, then it goes back into auto magic. And of course, if you get in areas where the stations are really crowded, you can obviously turn this off, and then it'll just tune the way it normally would. Interesting thing about this unit as well, and I'm not really around any stereo stations, but if you get a stereo broadcast, it'll light this, or the tuning pointer, it'll light it red. So that was, I think, another more or less original idea for Radio Shack. So the Quadravox, the QVox, the Auto Magic, and the stereo tuning pointer that would turn red if you received a stereo broadcast. Those are all fairly, gimmicky, unique things for Radio Shack. So I opened this thing up and just wanted everybody to take a look at it. It's basically just comprised of two circuit boards. The first one, of course, houses the tuning section, and you can see that it's a 3-gang tuner. And then the Auto Magic circuitry is in this area of the tuner. Auto Magic IC, and then that's the FM MPX IC for stereo broadcast and all of that. Very easy to align this for both AM and FM operation. Fairly robust power supply, really, when you look at this, for a 25-watt amp. And again, everything here is quasi-complementary. It's not NPN, PNP, it's NPN straight across the board. Several things, not quite, these type of amps I don't think are quite as efficient as NPN, PNP, but I think, and I've said this before, that as far as switching distortion is concerned, these might be a little better because you have the same transistor handling both the upside and downside of the waves. So probably a little lower on switching distortion. Then again, I might be wrong about that. The other circuit board on this thing, as you can see, houses both the phono circuit, which is all discrete circuitry, and the receiver preamp and power amplifier driver circuits. So that's it. Two circuit boards, and this is very similar internally to the architecture of the STA 90, which was the bigger brother of this one. That one put out 45 watts per channel, and the only thing I really notice on it is that it has bigger power supply, and the transistors, I think, are higher power handling, but it's not much different internally. Obviously, it doesn't have the circuitry for the Auto Magic tuning, but again, this was a fairly prevalent design for a lot of Radio Shack receivers. Probably cheaper to produce these. When I got this receiver, it had one of the lights burned out in the tuning dial area, and then I also replaced the stereo pilot light on it as well, and then did a little cleaning on the controls, and then some adjustments over here for the FM muting, and that pretty much fixed everything. This is a really dependable receiver, I think, for as old as it was, and there was practically nothing wrong with it. It plays fantastic. If you want to play, you know, Michael Jackson's Billie Jean or Lady Gaga, any of that stuff, Poker Face, this will do it just fine. The sound of this, warm and liquidy. The only thing you don't want to do is turn on the loudness. And the loudness, here I'll show you, if there are people who want to do work on this, the loudness circuitry is right down in here. I'm actually looking, it's right in the center, and you see those two greenish resistors on the sides of those capacitors. Those are the ones I believe that you want to replace. They're difficult, but you'd want to replace them with higher value resistors, and probably in the 15K range. And that would pretty much put the loudness back to where it is, to where you can actually listen to it and not have your ears destroyed by the excessive bass. But perfect loudness really ruined many a good receiver that Radio Shack had. And I'm sure that there were people who bought these at the time and then got them home and engaged the loudness, and it was like, this is unlistenable. And they either returned them, or like so many people would do, they just put them on their shelf. And that's the way it is. But once again, from 1977-78, this is the bigger cousin of the Realistic STA 64. This is the Realistic STA, and we'll go right down here, 84. Well, that just about does it for my audio stuff. Please check out my other site. I'm on both YouTube and Rumble with, you know, my audio stuff. But my other site is A Father's Devotions. You can check that out. God bless you all. Bye-bye.